Hello, hello. And this is consciousness. It's a chapter that deals with a lot of topics, a lot of topics. More time spent on hypnosis than I would have predicted. As as a child, I was pretty obsessed with hypnosis, but to get books on it from the local library, they kept them behind the librarian's desk, and you had to ask personally, and I was too scared. So I never did read up on it. We had a faculty member in the department who used to do hypnosis demonstrations in class. I sat in on her class and tried, but it did not work for me. This opening vignette is interesting, and it's about narcolepsy, sudden sleep attacks with paralysis. Very debilitating condition if it's not, if you can't get it under control. You can't drive, you can't carry your children down the stairs. It's a bad one. Unfortunately, people laugh about it. So at the beginning of the chapter, there's a bit of sort of the philosophy of consciousness and why it's difficult to study. And yeah, we now have brain scans, which when I was you, we didn't have this technology. And there's William James, Stream of Consciousness. And there's the picture up top is a functional MRI, fMRI. The MRI is high resolution, but the functional part is not. And it's a bit murky and it involves computer analysis. It's an important research tool, but we're still learning to use it. And the book differentiates between the easy and difficult problems of consciousness and qualia, which are part of the not difficult but hard problems of consciousness. And easy we can do, hard the book is a little negative about that. We may never get that one under control. And brain activity, EEGs, are going to be important. Why did consciousness evolve? Calvin and Hobbes, that was quite a strip back in the day. And why did we evolve consciousness because it's useful, or is it an epiphenomenon that other things evolved and consciousness occurred a bit by accident? And there's mind's eye, which was discussed earlier in terms of development and anticipating what other organisms will do. Obviously, that border collie, it's a border collie, right? That the animal has to be able to predict what other people will do. So the theory of mind discussion from the development chapter is going to be relevant to thinking about this. Internal dialogue, one of the faculty members in the psychology department did research on that. I mean, when you think, do you talk to yourself? Most people say that they do. Some people actually hear voices. Other people don't. Unfortunately, his research was very clever, but it didn't end up giving us any answers or new directions for research. So the corpus callosum we've seen before. We saw with the fetal alcohol brain. It's basically not there. The split brain preparation is not a split brain. It's the cerebral hemisphere is being split by cutting the corpus callosum. And it's pretty amazing that you can do this, and it can greatly reduce seizures in some people. And if you severed it, you have relatively independent left and right cerebral hemispheres. Sperry is very famous, almost certainly won the Nobel Prize. And the research that's depicted in here is in almost all fundamentals textbooks. So there's the visual fields again, and we discussed how they're parsed apart with the left field going to the right occipital cortex and the left field going left field going to the right, right field going to the left, and that crossing is not part of the corpus callosum. It's a different pathway. The corpus callosum is that dark band there in the middle, and even if you make it so that visual stimulus only goes to one hemisphere, that hemisphere can share normally through the corpus callosum with the the opposite hemisphere. I was trying to not use that term. There's a split brain patient. Again, they still have crossing of the visual fields, but when something ends up in the right occipital lobe, it cannot get to the left. And similarly, if it goes to the left, it cannot get to the right. So they're very interesting people, and lots of interesting research has been done with that. And the left cerebral hemisphere is much more verbally gifted, but the right hemisphere can understand simple things. And of course, the right hemisphere can point using the left arm. So this is classic research being done with computers now. The participant stares at this dot, and then we flash things on the screen that are in the left hemisphere and therefore go to the right. I'm sorry, in the left visual field, therefore going to the right hemisphere, or in the right visual field going to the left hemisphere. And you can point, and interesting stuff. Very clever. Ooh, Gazzaniga and Ledoux, boy, those are two big names, too, in neuroscience. Really big. Not like Nobel big, but on the cusp. And the brain patients challenge our everyday experience of consciousness. What we think is going on in that incredibly complicated organ known as the brain. We have simple ideas of what's going on, but it ain't necessarily so. And one interesting phenomenon here, which you get with chronic alcoholics with thiamine deficiency, is confabulation, and also some early forms of dementia. They make stuff up. Why are you laughing? And you make up a story. And why did you point at that? And you make up a story. And sometimes people will confabulate when they can't find something that someone has stolen it, and can sometimes get pretty emotional about it. Confabulation is not lying. right. They believe what they're saying. We create reality on the fly all the time, and we create it after we've done things often to explain why we just did what we did. And I'm not talking about people with split brains or cut corpus callosums. This is like everyday human behavior. And we are not always aware of what our brain is deciding to do. So true. I love, wondering who decided to get me up out of bed. I'm thinking about it, and then the covers are moving, and I'm getting up. Who did that? And when you take notes, uh, who moved that arm? Why does it happen? And the issue of free will, which is a huge issue in some departments. I've gotten into violent arguments about this, and now I just try to avoid it. An experiment in the 80s suggested that our conscious self may not be in charge of our decisions. These data, look at them and look at them again, and be somewhat humbled by what they've demonstrated. When you think you've done something consciously, but you didn't. You were ready to do it before that. And as brain imaging techniques have improved, scientists have gotten better and better at detecting signals that precede a movement. Really, really quite amazing. Who's in charge? We have fMRI, and they watch the screen and they're looking at letters, and then they choose with their free will, if there is such a thing, when to move their arms, and we can see what's going on in their brain. And there you go. The readiness potential in the motor cortex arose before the participant was aware of the urge to push. fMRI detected the readiness potential 5 seconds before awareness of the willingness to push. Yo, who is running the show in there? Some people go overboard and say we don't have free will. Neuroscientists and philosophers, who I really respect, have serious discussions about this. It's beyond my pay grade. It's beyond my pay grade. Pinker and Daniel Dennett both write about this. I love Dilbert, and let me just read this to you. I have a Dilbert in my office that's related to this, and Dogbert says to Dilbert, "Do you think the chemistry of the brain controls what people do?" And Dilbert, who's an engineer, says, "Well, of course." Then how can we blame people for their actions? This is why philosophy and theology are very emotionally involved in this, because people have free will to do as they choose. Are you saying that free will is not is not part of the brain? Of course it is, but it's the part of the brain that's out there, just kind of being kind of free, a little bit reminiscent of Descartes, I would say. So you're saying the free will part of the brain is exempt from the natural laws of physics, obviously. Otherwise, we couldn't blame people for anything they do. Do you think the free will part of the brain is attached, or does it float nearby? Shut up. Boy, that nails it. Nails it. And I'm kind of a dogbert in that discussion. And Sleep and Dreams, everybody loves this. Gilgamesh, I don't know why I've been running into Gilgamesh quite a bit. I've been looking at ancient history for a while. And if you want to, make some money, invent a new diet or deal with dreams. And it's in the Bible. Dreams were nuts for the Bible. And it's in the Quran as well. But it's a nice image of Gilgamesh. Sleep-waking cycle, biological clocks. I really wanted to do some research on that too, but technically I couldn't do it. We are diurnal animals. We're active when it's bright, but we studied rats and mice who tend to be nocturnal, and they are active at night. When I ran the breeding colony, we had reverse cycles. So our day was their night, so that when we went in there to study them, they were supposed to be active. Many labs don't do that. They just keep the animal breeding colony on the same light cycle as we do, and we study them in the middle of when they're supposed to be asleep. Biological clocks, really interesting. They communicate with different parts of the brain using mechanisms that we wouldn't have predicted, and I won't make you suffer through my theories about what's going on there. But the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is coming up shortly, is important. Circadian rhythms, activity levels, and hamsters were popular for this, but same kinds of things with rats and mice. And this is the way they used to do it. They'd have a little running wheel, and rats, mice, and hamsters love to run. And then there's a sensor connected to the wheel, and every time it goes around, you put a tick mark on that strip of paper. And so on the right, you get to look at activity and non-activity levels, and you can see that just before their day starts, which means darkness, they become pretty active. And there's light shifts, and you can blow up the suprachiasmatic nucleus and mess with circadian rhythms too. And a friend of a friend was not entrained to our day-night cycle. So he had a cyclical sleep problem. He'd be in sync with the real world, and then he would drift, and then he'd be in sync with the real world, and then he'd drift. Fortunately, he got a job doing editing for East Coast companies on his own time in Colorado, and was able to work when he wanted to. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is above the optic chiasm, which is where the left and right visual fields cross, and it's in the hypothalamus. And in normal people, it helps us entrain, stay in sync with day-night cycles. Jet lag is a really nice graph on the next page. Whoops. There's the suprachiasmatic nucleus above the optic chiasm, and after you destroy it, you're free running and you're all over the place. Are circadian rhythms important? Yes, they are. So I used to go to LA every summer and then come back, and notice that if you're traveling west, you win 44% of your games. And if you're traveling east, only 37% of the games. So it's easier to cope with jet lag when you fly toward the setting sun than toward the rising sun. And there's people who will sell you pills and such to help you not be very jet lagged. Unfortunately, we make some people work on rotating shifts where you work on 1 8-hour shift for a few weeks, and then they shift you to another one, and then we shift you to another one because it's fair and balanced. Everybody has to take all shifts. Unfortunately, we almost lost the 3 Mile Island reactor because people running that reactor were on a rotating shift that did not help them recognize what was going on there when trouble ensued. I was on the West Coast when that happened. People were coming from Harrisburg to stay in Scranton, hoping that was far enough away so that they wouldn't die if there was a real meltdown. Sometimes we put physicians on these kinds of irrational lack of sleep schedules, and then we throw them into emergency rooms and hope they don't kill too many people. And EEG, electroencephalograms, there's different patterns, and that will be shown on the next page. Desynchronized EEG alpha, which is fairly synchronized, and then stages of sleep, stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. In my day, there were 4 stages, but they decided to collapse 3 and 4 into only stage 3. And slow wave sleep is so named because there are slow waves. And here are pictures. So there's normal waking, fairly high frequency. And stage 1 looks not too different from waking. Stage 2, you get sleep spindles and the occasional K complex. Stage 3, oh boy, that's big. And then after that, EEG in a typical night goes back to REM. REM sleep looks a lot like stage 1. It looks a lot like waking. It used to be called paradoxical sleep because when they first saw it, they thought the person had awakened, but they didn't. And this is the stage in which you typically get your vivid dreams. You're thinking in all your stages, typically, but your vivid story-like dreams are in REM. And of course, REM is named because of rapid eye movements. And if you've ever seen someone in this, children are very easy to watch. It's a bit creepy to see the eyes darting around under the closed eyelids as if they're looking at something. And, maybe they are. So there's a typical night's sleep. You don't go into your first REM period for about almost 90 minutes, and then you get another one, and then you get another one. Now look at the pattern. Notice how they're getting longer as the night goes on. And look at your slow wave sleep. You are less and less deep. So you seem to invest in slow wave sleep heavily in the beginning of the night, and then starts shifting from that to the desynchronized sleep of REM. It's often more difficult to awaken people from slow wave sleep. And there's an evolutionary theory that gives a possible explanation for this pattern. I don't think the book does it. So there's non-REM sleep and REM sleep. You're basically paralyzed in REM. And by the way, that's related to narcolepsy. People who with narcolepsy, they suddenly become paralyzed. So when you're in REM, you are actively paralyzed, which seems crazy, but it's true. There are neural pathway from the brainstem to the spinal cord that makes your voluntary muscles not move. Fortunately, your breathing is spared, so you don't die. Anything in here that deals with Freud, I'm not too interested in. And there's some Freud there. I don't care. Freud's ideas about how to interpret dreams in order to understand a person's unconscious motives have not stood the test of time. And once again, his theories are untestable. So basically, I'm not amused. Activation synthesis. There are parts of your brainstem, the core of your brain, that are very active during REM, and they send neural activity up into your occipital lobes, and dreams are largely visual, and that's a possible explanation for why we get the vivid dreamlike sleep. Sleepwalking, not usually part of REM. I remember in high school, I used to do some sleepwalking. I loved school. Oh my God, I get to go to school tomorrow. I would get up and get dressed for school in the middle of the night. And occasionally I would confess to eating the last donut when I didn't. Night terrors. I never had those, but boy, they can be real. And there was a population of people who came over after the Vietnam War where people were dying in their sleep, apparently during night terrors. So there's the kitty in sleep on the top. That would be slow wave because they're not paralyzed. And then on the bottom, boom, they are paralyzed. And now we're talking about the neural substrates of that. There's a color blue that's called cerulean blue, and there's a part of the brain called the locus coeruleus, which is discussed there, because in fresh brains it looks a little blue. I've never seen that one in fresh brains, but they say it looks a little blue. And there's an area right under it, which is the subcoeruleus, which is a good name for something that's under the locus coeruleus. And they do a lot of research on sleep in cats. And if they destroy the subcoeruleus, they seem to act out their dreams. And I think they're dreaming about killing us. There's REM behavior disorder, which can be pretty scary, mostly in men. I'm a little too old for this to start. But this is different from sleepwalking. And sometimes bad things happen during these bouts. The syndrome, primarily found in middle-aged men, involves movements during REM sleep that seem to correspond to movements going on during a dream. You hope they're dreaming happy dreams. And there's researchers, and this is classic research on what parts of the brain, largely the brain stem, but what parts of the brain are involved in controlling sleep. And in the first animal, the isolated brain, they disconnect the brain from the spinal cord, and it doesn't do much. You have waking, you have slow wave sleep, you have REM sleep. But that second one, where you isolate the forebrain, suddenly the animal is in slow wave sleep forever. And that's interesting. And there's a figure on the next page that overviews what we think. Where is it? Yes, overviews what we think is going on. We have a slow wave sleep center in the forebrain. We have sleep state control with the hypocretin, which will be discussed later in the textbook. And there's our blue locus coeruleus and the subcoeruleus, which is important for the active paralysis during REM sleep. And then there's the reticular activating system, the arousal center. So research that gave us that model goes back decades. And there's new stuff in there as well, too. And that's pretty well true. And you hope that all those pieces work together in synchrony. Oh, speaking of that, sleep paralysis. Some of you may have experienced waking up paralyzed, where you're fully conscious but you can't move. And some people get really freaked out about this. And Edgar Allan Poe apparently had this experience, and he was pretty freaked out and worried about being buried alive. If you really had to move, you would. Most people learn that the simplest way to deal with this paralysis is just drift back to sleep. I like calling computer tech, and they say, have you tried turning the machine off and turning it back on? And actually, that tends to work pretty well. Now, narcolepsy, we're learning about because there are dogs that have it. Not always that kind of dog, but dogs. And there's cataplexy where you're paralyzed, hypocretin, and the neuropeptide in the hypothalamus, and there's a normal brain on the left, and those dark cells have hypocretin, and there's a narcoleptic brain on the right, and it's gone. It's gone, Jim. And there's sleep paralysis. And there's a famous painting of a nightmare. Why do we need sleep? And major theories, Nietzsche adaptation, energy conservation, memory consolidation, body restoration, and there's a discussion of each of those. And Nietzsche adaptation is pretty evolutionary, that we share environments with other species and we take turns. And when it's their turn, we go to sleep. And when it's their turn, they go to sleep. I kind of like that. Energy conservation. Certainly, there's some of that. Yeah, I love that picture. That animal is out. Memory consolidation is popular. Ooh, Bjork. He was chair of psychology at UCLA when I was there. Sleep learning doesn't seem to be too important. But if you learn stuff before you go to sleep, we do seem to remember it better. It's better consolidated. So, people pulling all-nighters right before exams, that can help you because at least you're looking at the material, but you're going into sleep deprivation, and particularly REM sleep deprivation makes it difficult for you to learn things. And there's body restoration. There's data there. People who are rats and people who are totally deprived of sleep they can die. So that's a bad one. Sleep debt. This is not like filling up the tank in your car. People who go nuts on weekends and don't sleep well, you don't get that back. And of course, we wake children up very early in the morning, and we can put them into sleep deprivation too. And then we put them in school and ask them to learn things, and they can barely remain conscious. There's Randy Gardner, a famous study, and he was pretty okay. He broke his record, but they used more drugs than he did. The British Challenger used caffeine, and complete loss of sleep for more than a few weeks, fatal. And fatal familial insomnia. This must be a nightmare. It's a bit like Huntington's. It doesn't hit you until you're older. And then you start eating, you don't sleep very much, and they lose weight, they're feverish, they can become quite disoriented. And there's a picture of a brain. That's a human. And the arrows are pointing to literal holes in the brain. You have your excitatory neurotransmitter, glutamate. If it's released at high levels, it can literally stimulate neurons to death. I don't know what's going on in that picture, but you don't want that brain. Now, there are some people who don't sleep much and they're fine. And there's a story about the woman who's in the next page. There she is. She only sleeps 1 or 2 hours a night, and she seems to be fine. Human behavior is on the spectrum, and she doesn't need much sleep. Insomnia is big, big business. And we used to give barbiturates to people with insomnia, and boy, was that a bad idea. Sleep state misperception is interesting. You sleep normally, but you don't think you do. And sometimes you do that because you're dreaming about being awake trying to sleep. And if you think you're sleep deprived, that can mess you up. And there's GABA, which we've seen before, and barbiturates. And largely, I would say, don't do it. And with the barbiturates in particular, you become tolerant, and then when you stop taking them, you can't go to sleep because you're rebounding from the drugs. Use of sleeping pills can also produce persistent sleep drunkenness. Try to deal with your insomnia organically, as the book suggests. CPAP. A lot of people I know, including me, need that. I remember one Father's Day, every card I got talked about my snoring. It was legendary. I used to teach a lab class in the psych department where we would sit around a table, and I'd put up things and we'd talk about them. And I was falling asleep in the class, during the class. People were thinking I was being thoughtful. Oh no, I'm not thoughtful. I'm unconscious. So I'm a big fan of sleep apnea, the CPAP treatment. That's relatively new, really relatively new. A friend of mine, we shared a room at neuroscience one year, and oh boy, did he have sleep apnea. It was horrible. Uh, I found myself breathing with him, and he would just stop. And I told him about it, and that was so long ago. There were no CPAP machines. The treatment was to do surgery and kind of try to ream out your throat to give you a bigger opening. That ruined his career. He got like me and kind of turned stupid, and he lost his practice. SIDS, very important, and we've seen this in the previous chapter, back sleeping, and it it may be related to sleep apnea, and they don't have the mechanisms to wake up. And there's do's and don'ts of getting a good night's sleep, none of which involve taking drugs. Uh, just get on a schedule, try to stay on the schedule. And there's the little baby on the back. And there's lifespan, waking, REM sleep, non-REM sleep. And as you can see, infants do a lot of REMing. And that declines across time. My REM time is pretty far down. My waking time is pretty far up. My non-REM sleep is pretty down too. And there we are. Your aunt or grandmother nodding off. And the loss of stage 3 sleep is especially prominent in older adults. And 90-year-olds don't even do it. And disrupted sleep. The textbook I use for behavioral neuroscience has a graph that looks quite a bit like this one, which shows a normal night's sleep. Where is it? All right, did I make it up? I should have brought this up when it was. Oh my God, I'll never get back. But a normal night's sleep, there we go. There's cycles, and you have a lot of slow wave sleep early, and then less and less, and then not too much REM early, and then more and more. You should see the sleep patterns of people in my age range. It's not a pretty picture. It's like shredded. All sorts of micro awakenings and virtually no slow wave sleep. It's not pretty. And now I have to go through like 10 pages to get us back to where we were. And I think this is about where I want to be. And there's this huge discussion of hypnosis and meditation, way more than I probably would have invested in. History of hypnosis, Mesmer, and these magic tricks that you can do, which are really not magic tricks. Mesmer used magnets, and he would wave them around, and people would swoon. And the French government wanted to know what was going on. And fortunately for them, they had Ben Franklin hanging out in France, and they did a review of mesmerism. and found it really had no substance. And then we stopped using the term mesmerism and we started calling it hypnosis, um, where there aren't magnets involved. But people are nuts for magnets still. And there's mesmer making someone swoon. And a friend of mine in grad school did hypnosis research, and they used the Stanford Hypnotic Susceptibility Test. I never took it, but I don't think I'm very prone to being hypnotized. And there's a discussion of what's going on in hypnosis, and the placebo effect comes up. So this is interesting, and pain is my historical focus of interest. It does seem to be able to reduce pain. It doesn't eliminate pain, but it makes it less awful. And there's some data down there that support that position. And chronic pain, again, you're not going to get rid of it, but you can make it less annoying. And there are some fMRIs, and what you expect, which of course relates to placebo, can affect your neural activity. Oh no. Oh my God. Oh, there we go. So the anterior cingulate cortex seems to be very important for the perception of pain and suffering. And if you expect something very painful, that area will light up quite a bit more. Cingulate cortex is really interesting. I don't think it's been mentioned before. It's different in liberals and conservatives, by the way. Doesn't improve memory, age regression, no. I lived through the hysteria over recovered memories, and people went to jail and lives were ruined. And it's witness recollection, largely no. No. Recovered memories from the past. These pictures are so depressing. I mean, people were put in jail for doing things they didn't do because of fake memories. Elizabeth Loftus, she is so important to this field. She's a social psychologist, and her research very important for discrediting a lot of these stories. And that led one person with a recovered memory to sue her and just really destroy her life for a while. But eventually it turned out okay. And here's a recovered memory of dad killing someone, and based on that 20-year-old memory, dad went to jail. And trances, social theory of hypnosis. Everybody's interested in hypnosis. I guess it's good that he went into this kind of depth. Hilgard and the Hidden Observer. That's important. Hilgard is a real person, and there's the Hidden Observer, 1975. So pain intensity without hypnosis, reported pain by key pressing, verbally reported pain. It definitely can interact with pain. And role playing, trying to do what makes people happy. Research indicates that hypnosis is both a result of social influencing and a change in consciousness. Whether that change is a true altered state is hard to say. if Dr. Mesmer's brainchild has taught us anything, misconceptions and controversies about hypnosis will continue. And now we're getting into meditation, which is a popular topic these days. And this is a nice discussion of meditation. And of course, the serious meditators like Zen Buddhists, they choose to do that. So that's not an experiment. Those are correlational data. But as it says, these studies don't prove that meditation prevents brain shrinkage, because the people who choose to meditate, that kind of person may just not be very prone to shrinkage. As with hypnosis, people have wasted time debating about whether meditation is a, quote, altered state. Ooh, that reminds me of a movie called Altered States. That was a weird one. The altered EEG of people who are meditating proves only that they're relaxing. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not anti-meditation. I'm very leery of hypnosis. And now psychoactive drugs. And as we'll see later, these were really dumped on for a while. And now people are starting to use them and thinking that some of them may be useful for treating things like depression. Drugs that act like a normal neurotransmitter agonist, if they block it, it's an antagonist. The neuromodulator doesn't work directly on the receptor for the neurotransmitter, but it works in a related place that can change the sensitivity of the receptor to the normal neurotransmitter. So there's the normal neurotransmitter and its opening channels. It doesn't always. There's the agonist where the neurotransmitter doesn't even have to touch the receptor. The drug will take care of it. And there's an antagonist who sits in the receptor site, and the normal neurotransmitter can't get in there. And the neuromodulator, the receptor is really a giant multi-pieced protein complex. So you can have a modulator affect one piece of the protein complex, which will alter how the complex responds to the normal neurotransmitter. Alcohol can do that one. And speaking of alcohol, there's GABA and catecholamines, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine activating. Marijuana works on a receptor system in the brain and other parts of the body. Heroin is an opiate. The book, I'm sure, uses the term opioid, that works on opioid receptors. I use the term opioid to refer to what your body builds as a receptor, or as the neurotransmitter receptor complex. And opiates are things like morphine and heroin that you take that are drugs. And GABA, amphetamines, depressants, we dealt with these a little bit in terms of sleep, and barbiturates. The history of alcohol is interesting. There's a little documentary on how beer saved the world. It's tongue-in-cheek, a little bit humorous, but also within limits, historically accurate. Boy, anesthesia. Can you imagine what medicine was like before anesthesia, doing surgeries on conscious people or people that you gave alcohol to the point that the alcohol almost killed them. Very happy to have anesthetics and tranquilizers, which were, they're still pretty popular. Xanax, Librium, Valium, Ativan. I know people who take those things. Almost all depressants have their effect through receptors for GABA. And GABA is an important inhibitory neurotransmitter. So neuromodulators, and I've alluded to this, bind to the GABA receptor complex and make them much more responsive to GABA. Yep. And, we just had some hazing-induced, fraternity-induced alcohol deaths. 21 shots for your birthday, that is irrational. And then they let you sleep it off and you vomit and choke and die. Really bad. It's not a game. Shots are really threatening. MRI, not fMRI, show that if alcoholics stop drinking alcohol, their volume of their cortical gray area increases within weeks. That's pretty neat. And stimulants, nicotine is popular. Sorry, I don't think this cough is going to go away. Ooh, I don't have water. So nicotine affects not just the brain, but other organ systems. And we use it as an insecticide, actually. My current drug of choice is caffeine. I have 4 shots of espresso every morning. And it blocks a neuromodulator, which means that other neurotransmitters like catecholamines are more activated. Caffeine boosts neural activity, heightened alertness, even euphoria. I don't think I get that one. Okay, so he's talking about negative health consequences of caffeine. There are also tons of data that coffee consumption, caffeine consumption, is actually a good thing. There's a number of studies on that. I hope he changes that in the next edition. It's not that it can't be bad, but I think it's more good than bad. And amphetamines, I can't imagine this one taking amphetamines. You can develop symptoms like paranoid schizophrenia, compulsive agitated, paranoid, and in a society where guns are cheap and plentiful, that's not good. Cocaine, the South American natives used it very kindly and gently by chewing on leaves, and there wasn't a huge effect on behavior. It made them better able to work long hours, which the Spanish invaders were very happy about. And it used to be in Coca-Cola, and you used to be able to buy tonics. There was a wine that had cocaine in it, and a pope gave that wine a papal medal for how much he loved it. And there's disturbing pictures. Methamphetamine use, not too good for you. Opiates, good. He doesn't say opioids. in the popular culture, they're always saying opioids. But Mark and I went through the system at about the same time. Opioids are what's inside you. Opiates are what you take. So there's opium poppies and morphine, and it's an analgesic. Heroin is an analgesic, which basically turns into morphine before it hits your receptors. Endogenous opiates, those you can call opioids. There we go. Opioid receptors are concentrated in certain regions of the brain. They can produce strong analgesia. That's what I used to, when I was at UCLA, that's what I used to do my research on. Hallucinogens, um, LSD was popular, mescaline, psilocybin. They often mess with serotonin. And these are the ones that people are looking at now for possible therapeutic use with people who are dying, people who are depressed. Salvia. In my lifetime, salvia was legal in Pennsylvania, and then it wasn't legal. And it's a rare one that works through an opioid receptor. And normally it's serotonin. And I had a friend who took LSD who used to have flashbacks, which is not so good if you're driving. And if you haven't seen The Big Lebowski, you should. And he talked about the occasional LSD flashbacks, PCP, angel dust, dissociating drugs, depersonalization, detachment from reality. Very interesting effect. And ecstasy, these data down below are from 1995. I'm not sure I totally believe them, but if I did believe them, I'd go nowhere near ecstasy. So those are serotonin neurons. And on the right is what the monkey brain looks like after a single dose of ecstasy. Yo, I don't want to go anywhere near something that's going to deplete my serotonin. But I really think more recent research is less scary than that picture. How are we doing on controlling drugs with laws? Not good. And there's one of my least favorite presidents, Nixon. He put together a commission to study what we should do with marijuana. And the former governor of Pennsylvania was the head of that commission. And the commission said, "Oh, we got this. We know what you should do. Legalize it." And Nixon did not. He started the war on drugs, and we've been paying for it ever since. Reagan did a little bit of damage there too. There's THC and endocannabinoids. I have a lecture on this, but I don't think you're going to get it. I would not use marijuana with a developing brain. It's a very important. The endocannabinoid systems are very important to brain development and brain functioning. And for you to take a drug that's messing with a very important developmental neuromodulator, neurotransmitter, just is not smart. When you're in your mid-20s and your prefrontal lobes have kicked in, I don't have much concern about that. But younger people, I do have concerns. And yeah, we have a lot of people in jail because of our criminal justice system. You might look up what Portugal does. and it's much more benign, and it seems to work better. There are other countries in the world. You might look at what they do. And substance abuse disorder, addiction, withdrawal symptoms, which are usually the opposite of what the drug originally did. And there are pathways in the brain that evolved to deal with reward because we had to evolve neural mechanisms that dealt with reward and even addiction. The neural circuitry of reward and addiction is very important to understanding responses to drugs and addictive phenomena. And there's a discussion of reward pathway from midbrain to frontal cortex, and the area of the midbrain that you should be interested in is called the ventral tegmental area, VTA, ventral tegmental area, and it projects to the forebrain. And one of the places it goes to is the nucleus accumbens. I think I've had 3 graduates at the university who studied this pathway. It's very important to reward and addiction, and there it is. So in the midbrain, you have the VTA, ventral tegmental area. It projects to the forebrain, lots of dopamine, and it goes to more than just the nucleus accumbens, but the VTA, nucleus accumbens system is important to addiction and reward. But also notice it's dumping stuff all over your prefrontal and frontal lobes. It's very important. Addiction is real, and it's real because it's part of the brain that evolved to reward you and sometimes to addict you to things like your children or where you live, and possibly your religious beliefs as well. So I'm a big fan of VTA to nucleus accumbens. You might know that one. And, you can see that many psychoactive drugs conceal a horrible trap. You experience great pleasure, which leads you to use it more and more, but your pleasure goes down and you get withdrawal symptoms and you are hooked, my friend. So there's a rat getting an injection of a drug, I forget what this is, cocaine. So saline, they don't really care about getting injections of saline. Oh, but they love the cocaine. And we're back to marijuana and risky for adolescents. And I think that's important. I think that's important. And I believe that is the end of this chapter. And there's Muse. So it's a diverse chapter. It's dealt with a lot of topics. The addiction is very important, and society's response to addiction is very important. And our criminal justice system, really was not very focused on citizens. It was focused on the big business of drugs and trying to suppress drugs. We've been doing it since I was in college, and we have a huge number of U.S. citizens in jails, more than I believe any other advanced civilization, and it doesn't seem to be helping us very much. So again, you might look at Portugal. Okay, so that's that one, and we'll see you on the flip side.